Thank you, Ras Vilas. Starting off our weekly Salt Lake City Sanga, to which anybody else is invited. We've got the meeting ID and the password there in our Facebook comments. Our outsider, quote unquote, is Vijay Krishnadas, who's joining us from the Portuguese Azores. Otherwise, so far, everyone's from our Salt Lake City congregation. And we had a nice reopening of the evening Saturday program last night with Navina, Nidara, and Advaita. Good crowd showed up, and we're going to do our very best to repeat that for next week. So anybody who didn't make it, please come. We're observing all the protocols, social distancing, to make it as safe as possible for all the participants. So once again, the Salt Lake City Saturday night programs from 7 to 8 are reopened with Kirtan, lecture, and wonderful, sumptuous prasadam, thanks to Rakesh, Vilas, Prashant, and our other excellent cooks who reside there. We actually had some volunteers come up from Spanish Fork also. 3 young ladies who are residing here on a volunteer work share basis, and they had a wonderful time under the supervision of Sundari Priya, who worked them very hard, but they were happy for it. No complaints. All right. Seeing as how the ball, so to speak, is with Ras Vilas, why don't we ask him to read the verse and the at least the beginning of the purport, and start things off with any comments that he may have. Are you there, Ras Vilas? And also Amrita Sundari, so you can go as a tag team in tandem.
I have to tag with her, Prabhu. Otherwise, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, aren't we all?
So it's Srimad Bhagavatam, verse first canto, first chapter, 20th. Kirtamam kil karmani saharamen keshava atim triyani bhagavan good kapat manusha. So kapat manush, mischievous people. So kirtvam kil karmani saharamen keshava. Translation: Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balaram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. The doctrines of anthropomorphisms and zoomorphisms are never applicable to Sri Krishna or the personality of Godhead. The theory that a man becomes God by dint of penance and austerity is very much rampant nowadays, especially in India. Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were detected by the sages and saints to be the personality of Godhead, as indicated in revealed scriptures. Many unscrupulous men have created their own incarnations. This process of concocting an incarnation of God has become an ordinary business, especially in Bengal. Any popular personality with a few traits of mystic powers will display some feat of jugglery and easily become an incarnation of Godhead by popular vote. Lord Sri Krishna was not that type of incarnation. He was actually the personality of Godhead from the very beginning of his appearance. He appeared before his so-called mother as four-armed Vishnu. Then at the request of mother, he became like a human child and at once left her for another devotee at Gokula, where he was accepted as a son of Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda Mata. Similarly, Sri Baladev, the counterpart of Lord Krishna, was also considered a human child, born of another wife of Sri Vasudeva. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that his birth and deed are transcendental, and that anyone who is so fortunate as to know the transcendental nature of his birth and deeds will at once become liberated and eligible to return to the kingdom of God. So knowledge of the transcendental nature of the birth and deeds of Lord Sri Krishna is sufficient for liberation. In the Bhagavatam, the transcendental nature of Lord is described in 9 cantos, and in 10 cantos, his specific pastimes are taken up. All this becomes known as one's reading of his literature progresses. It is important to note here, however, that Lord exhibited his divinity even from the lap of his mother, that his deeds are all superhuman. He lifted Govardhan Hill at the age of 7, and all these acts definitely prove him to be actually the supreme personality of Godhead. Yet, due to his mystic covering, he was always accepted as an ordinary human child by his so-called father and mother and other relatives. Whenever some Herculean task was performed by him, the father and mother took it otherwise, and they remained satisfied with unflinching parental love for their son. As such, The sages of Naimisaranya describe him as apparently resembling a human being, but actually he is the Supreme Almighty. So in this verse, the supremacy of Lord Krishna is clearly reflected by Srila Prabhupada and Sukadev Goswami. And not only reflected, but re-emphasized and re-established. Here Srila Prabhupada, on one hand, emphasizing the happening of different incarnations of Krishna. On the other hand, he just chastising people tend to take the advantage that Lord appeared as human being, and they pretend to be Lord. So many people, in fact, a couple of weeks back, I went to Indian store and I saw Omkar Prabhu with one Prabhu from Los Angeles, their bookstall, their book table. And then one person was just arguing with Omkar. I stood there and then I interfered. But anyway, his whole point was, oh, Krishna just appeared as a human being a few years, 5,000 years back, and he just, resided like a human being. He has some mystic powers and he displayed those. So you will not find the scarcity of such people, around the world, especially in India. So in Vedas, actually, there are various ways mentioned to gain various mystic powers or siddhis. So people can do, in even Bhagavad Gita, it states, right, there is various type of siddhis you can gain by doing different types of austerities. That doesn't mean that you become Supreme Personality of Godhead. In recent time, we have seen many gurus in India pretending to be Godfather or spiritual masters, and none of their followers are either aware about Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, or they haven't read about all this at all. And these bogus guru do this actually. That is not to tell their followers about Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita intensely, because they know that people will be able to differentiate between gold and rusted iron. Once they come across Bhagavatam, this bogus guru will be gone. So then Srila Prabhupada states that, Lord Krishna did not become Supreme Lord because he gained some mystic powers, as happens with these bogus gurus and gods. While growing, he appeared as in the four-arm Vishnu form in front of Mother Devaki and Vasudev. And then on their request, he resumed the form of a newborn child. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord says, Janam Karam Chamai Divyam. And he clearly states to Arjuna that, by birth, Divya means transcendental. So by birth, my pastimes, my birth is transcendental. This means that Lord's birth and other activities are all transcendental and beyond our material imagination. And other thing about Lord Supreme Bhagwan is just not Bhagwan, right? There are like 6 qualities, and we have read about those 6 qualities, and those 6 qualities are present in unlimited quantities: power, beauty, renunciation, wealth, knowledge. And who has all those 6 qualities? Some may have wealth, they may not have beauty or renunciation, one or the other. In the verse also emphasizes Krishna's individuality, as Srila Prabhupada stated in the purport, that he's human being. He appeared at Lord Rama, he appeared at Balaram, and he comes as Lord Krishna. So that tells what individuality. Many Brahmanas, they in a Brahman feature, they emphasize that, okay, we all are just effulgent, we will all merge into the Lord. It's all, so we are also God. So that is not correct. As in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, as Lord says, na tavaham jatu nasam, na tavam neme jana dhipa, na chavav na bhivishyam, sarve vayam param. So never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of cease to exist. So that individuality is reflected in this purport also. And lastly, I will just finish with Lord Brahma's prayer in Brahma Samhita, and he clearly establishes Lord's supremacy and his power as Supreme Lord. Iswaram Param Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Ananta Adir Govinda Sarva Karna Karna. Krishna is known as Govinda, as the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body, and he is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he's the supreme cause of all causes. So I will let Amrita speak about anthropomorphism and zoomorphism highlighted in this verse. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your comments. Now to your better half.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. My obeisances to all the devotees. So at the beginning, I remember one pastime where Giriraj Maharaj attended one of Srila Prabhupada's lectures, and Srila Prabhupada spoke about how the Lord is always the Lord. You never become God. And how he explained how Krishna, it doesn't matter in what form he comes, when he appears, maybe as an animal, maybe as an aquatic, he always remains the Lord. And no living entity can become the Lord by any means. And Giriraj Maharaj says he remembered the poster he had in his living room. It was a big poster that said, "I am God." So, you would think these ideas are, prevalent only in India, but I was surprised to read that in 60s, many people here were also influenced by the same idea that I am God. And so Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by naming two attributes. Like, people sometimes they impose human characteristics and traits on the Lord, which is wrong. And also sometimes they impose animal-like characteristics on the Lord, which is also wrong. And that brings us to the question, why does the Lord appear as a person, as a human? I mean, of course, he has human features. Our bodies are after that spiritual form of the Lord. But when Krishna comes as a human, basically, he has to hide his Brahman effulgence. His effulgence is so strong that if he appeared as he is, nobody would be able to see him. Leave alone seeing him, probably most would become blind by the strong rays of the Lord's body. So he hides his rays and he appears like a very beautiful person. We read in Bhagavatam how when the demons see him for the first time, they're struck by the Lord's beauty, But because their heart is not pure, they cannot appreciate the Lord's beauty. So the idea is the Lord is the absolute truth. All truths depend on him. And if a person, his knowledge is incomplete, then his incomplete statements about the Lord doesn't make any meaning. How when the Lord is not dependent and they're struck by the Lord's beauty, But because they I don't know what happened.
Yes.
Anyway, so the idea is the Lord is perfect, absolute at any time. Whether he comes as a child, we see how when Krishna appeared as a child, he was tied by Mother Yashoda to the mortar. But even in his position as being tied by the mother, he relieved Kubera's children, Nalagriv and Mani Kuber, but he wouldn't, free himself. But that is his nature in terms of his reciprocation with his devotee. The Lord is always free, but he likes to be bound by the love, So, interesting observation into Krishna's nature and his position in this verse. Yeah.
Thank you both for your comments. I remember when Lord Chaitanya was on the planet, Lord Chaitanya was predicted, Krishna Bharati in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, said that in the Kali Yuga, Krishna would come in a non-black color to propagate Sankirtan. Lord Chaitanya was the authorized scheduled incarnation for the Kali Yuga. And while Lord Chaitanya was on the planet, some common person came running up to Lord Chaitanya, brought him to the edge of a lake and showed him some lights that had been appearing for some evenings in the dark there. And the man was telling Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how these lights must be an incarnation of Vishnu. So just imagine the irony of the situation. Lord Chaitanya is the authorized, predicted incarnation of Godhead for the age. And this common person, obviously with a poor fund of knowledge, is telling Lord Chaitanya about the incarnation, which is nothing more than some lights showing in the night on the middle of a lake, which is obviously fishermen use lights at night. That's what attracts fish to them so they can catch them. But just think of the irony and the ignorance. Mm-hmm. He's telling Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the bona fide incarnation, about this imagined bogus incarnation lights. So very nice comments. Ramadi Mortishu Kala Niyamena Tishtan. The authorized incarnations are predicted, they're mentioned in advance in the scriptures, they're not concocted. You all having a background in Bengal, which is notorious for having manufactured incarnations, it's probably appropriate that you all should begin a discussion. In fact, later on, if you want to even mention some names, I think you could probably get away with it without making too many people mad because you come from there. If I mention names, I'll definitely offend people. But if you mention any of those names of those concocted incarnations from Bengal, there's a little bit more credibility because you come from there or you live there at least.
You mentioned Prabhu, I will endorse. You mentioned those, and I will endorse.
Yeah, or at least you could describe them in detail without naming them, and everybody will know to whom you're referring. You know, incarnations of God who ate meat and worshiped Kali, for instance. All right.
That was one of the argument that person was giving in Indian grocery store. He said, "See Kali Yuga, you know how Kali Yuga is coming? Is coming after the name Kali, because the Kali Yuga. So they worship goddess Kali, right? So it's coming after Lord goddess Kali Yuga. That was his argument.
Well, I mean there's Kali, you know, it's no argument there. It is the age of Kali, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. That's not a counter argument at all. It's something we might even say.
Yeah.
Kamal, would you like to jump in here at this point? You always have very insightful comments and realizations.
Thank you, Charu Prabhu. Thank you for the lovely Kirtan and for the insightful comments. When I was reading this, just felt that in today's time and from a few years, everybody has been searching for a guru so that they can reach God. And because that is one way somebody can lead you towards God. And a lot of times we've seen, as this purport says, that we've seen the saints who've reached such levels. But when we are looking at a guru will never say that he is the God himself. The guru will always lead you towards God. He will always give you a mantra to chant and he'll say, do this, do these things, go towards him. I can help you. But you have to walk towards God. So I think a lot of these people who act would not actually lead you in that direction. They would lead you towards them instead. And they would either try and give you fruitive results or try and tell you do these things and I'll get these things done, or I can do this magic for you, or I can heal you like this, instead of saying that all of this will happen if you keep chanting. So I think that is something that we need to remember while seeing anybody who either is a great saint, to differentiate between somebody who's actually a guru and who's just acting to be one of those great sages, because it's very easy to act like one. It's very difficult to actually be one. So I think that is something we need to keep in mind when we are trying to do this. And also it's important to read and understand, because when we say that a lot of these people are using mystic powers, unless you do not know all of those things that Krishna has done or the God have done in their incarnations, it's difficult to differentiate. You would just know a few of those pastimes and you would kind of compare that, okay, they did this, even he's able to do something like this. So when the knowledge is very limited, we get confused very easily. So it's important to actually read or listen to somebody or any form to increase our knowledge, to be able to get rid of that ignorance and to make better decisions and go in a better path. That's all I have, Prabhuji.
A wonderful comment. Prabhupada says that those who take unqualified men as incarnations are suffering from a poor fund of knowledge. So Kama said that if you didn't know Janma karma, if you didn't know in truth, if you hadn't been trained by a spiritual master and you didn't know the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities, if you had a poor fund of knowledge in that area, and someone produces a little gold in the palm of their hand, and you didn't know what Krishna did, then that's the most amazing thing that you're aware of. That's the highest thing of which you're conscious. And so you might say, well, I don't know anything more mystical, miraculous than that, so I'll accept him as God. But a little bit of sober reflection would reveal that God creates millions and millions of gold mines on millions and millions of planets. So why would you accept someone who produces like less than an ounce of gold, just a little gold dust? Why would you accept that person as God when the actual God creates millions and millions of planets with millions and millions of gold mines? Poor fund of knowledge. Good point. Rakesh, do you have something to throw in at this point, Prabhuji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My danvat to all the assembled devotees. So, Prabhuji, in this verse, like as it's already beautifully described by Prabhuji and Mataji is here. So, one thing that we were reading is that, yeah, in India, like there are so many self-proclaimed God, and we need to be really careful with them, as they say, like we shouldn't blindly follow anyone or accept anyone as the guru. And there is a saying, okay, it's in Hindi. It says "Pani pijiye chhan kar and guru banaiye jaan kar," which means when you drink water, you need to make sure that it's clean. You filter it and then drink it. And then for the guru, you do not just blindly accept anybody and follow anybody blindly and say, yeah, that's my guru. Because if you are not following the right path, then for sure you are not going to lead to the right direction. And that's why one should be really careful accepting as a guru. And as Komal also mentioned, and Prabhupada very well, very beautifully described in one of his lectures as well, that if somebody is claiming that, oh, I'm the God, then that itself is enough for you to just walk away from it, because nobody can ever be God. We humans are born with certain number of gunas, and then the demigods have more than the humans, and then Krishna, who has all these gunas. So yeah, if somebody is claiming that I'm the God, then we should never follow or believe on such people, because one can only be the servant of the God. The true guru is a servant of the God who is here to deliver the souls who are stuck in this material world. And he would always say that I have realized God, and I am the messenger or the servant of the God, so that I can help you, your soul, to go back to the Godhead. That is the true purpose of a guru. He will never claim to be a God. So that is what's going on even in today's time in India. So there are so many gurus who are claiming them to be the God, and just based on their mystical or magical powers, they want, and some of those, not some, in fact, there are many people who are their followers and they blindly believe on them. So I pray to the God that they get some knowledge and actually come out of the trap of such gurus. And another thing that struck me during this verse and during the explanations given by the devotees here is that not everybody has the power to actually see the Lord. Even though the God will come and reveal himself, then if until and unless we have the blessings from the devotees and the true guru who will know, who can explain us that, okay, that is how we can see the Lord, that is not going to be possible. We cannot see the God just by the material eyes or just the material knowledge. It has to be transcendental blessing, then only we can see the Lord. And also it also depends on our own belief and how we want to see the Lord, or whether we have the belief in Lord or not. Because the universal form, God revealed it to Arjuna during the Kurukshetra battle, and that is when he explained Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna, when he saw the universal form, he was bewildered, and then the God blessed him with the transcendental eyes, and then he was able to receive this knowledge. But the same universal form, God also revealed it to other people as well. He was not revealing just to Arjuna. Like, for example, Dhritarashtra, he was seeing everything. Sanjaya was explaining what's going on. So Sanjaya was blessed with a similar kind of like transcendental eyes by Lord Vyasadeva, and then he could see and explain it to Dhritarashtra, but he couldn't get the same knowledge. And even to Duryodhana, Krishna revealed his form, but Duryodhana didn't accept that he is the supreme Lord. He simply said, "Oh, he is just a cowherd boy who knows some magic," and he thought that it's just the magic. So even though the Lord can reveal his form, but if the person is not blessed by the gurus, then he will not understand that. So that's why we need to have a good knowledge. As Komal Mataji also explained, that we should have the knowledge. We need to read through the scripture and hear from the bona fide masters that what are the pastimes of the Lord and what are his powers and what are his qualities. That is when, if the God reveals his form, that is the only way one can understand that thing, that power and that form. So that's my understanding and realization on this verse, Prabhuji. If I have misspoken anything, please correct me, and I beg for your mercy. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Prabhuji. Hari Bol.
Thank you very much for your comments. We also have to be qualified to see the Lord. It's not just a question of whether the Lord is there, but the question is whether you're qualified enough in order to see him. And that's why some effort needs to go into it. Janma karma medivyam evam yotitat. One should not understand him superficially or capriciously. One should not understand him through some unbona fide, ordinary, mundane source, but one should understand the beloved from the lovers. That's the whole point. Thank you for that. Prashant is commenting on the Facebook page here. Prashant quoted the Ishopanishad to the effect that the Lord is complete. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachate Purnasya Purnamadya Purnam Eva Vashishate. Prashant is complimenting our comments here on Facebook with quotes from the scriptures. Prabhupada challenged such so-called gods by saying that at the age of 7, Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. He lifted a huge mountain and held it on the little finger of his left hand. So if someone claims to be God, then the very least they could do is lift a mountain and hold it on the little finger of their left hand. Another thing they could do is show the universal form. So the fact is that although the Lord appears in a human-like form, manosim tanam asritaham, those who don't take the time and the trouble and go through the authorized sources to understand the transcendental nature of the Lord, they are deluded. Avajananti mamudha. They're bewildered by the appearance of the Lord in a human-like form. They fail to recognize him as Param Bhavam Ajananto. They don't recognize him that he's the supreme Lord of all that be and the creator of all millions and millions of universes. So they just completely, although they may know about Krishna academically or historically, they have no depth of understanding whatsoever. Prabhupada says, no one with a material body can perform the wonderful acts that Krishna performs. There are strong men who in their maturity, in their 20s, 25, 30, can lift up maybe a Volkswagen and hold it for 2 seconds with great effort and exertion and veins popping and red face. But what 7-year-old boy can effortlessly pick up a mountain as if it was weightless like a ball of cotton and hold it with a little finger of his left hand? Who with a material body can do that? So it's understood that God is perfect and complete. Even when he's exhibiting a so-called childish form, his body is not conditioned by its age or by its level of maturity. Whether he's a small child, having taken birth in the prison house of Kamsa, capable of showing his 4 arms, or whether he's a 7-year-old boy in Vrindavan, it doesn't matter what form he's showing at the time, all his forms are unlimitedly powerful. He's not conditioned by his so-called age and maturity. Therefore, it is said, he is always full in whatever way that he manifests or shows himself. Prashant is coming up with a bunch of other quotes as well. You want to weigh in here, Govindadev?
Yes, thank you, Caru, and my obeisances to all of the devotees. I think it's really interesting that the aberration that exists in Bengal is that there's so many people that profess that they're God. I mean, that was not a thing where I grew up. The environment I grew up in on Long Island was much more atheistic, if anything. And I'd always been very observant that the impersonalist monist view is something that Prabhupada, he takes that on with a vengeance really at every opportunity. And so I've never met anyone or hadn't met anyone that really was of that view until it was probably a year and a half ago after the Saturday program. And I was just wandering around to try to greet a newcomer. And I sat down with a guy, I think it was his first time there. And we got about 2 minutes into the conversation and he just announced kind of deadpan to me, yeah, I'm interested in this, but actually I'm God. And I was a little bit stunned. At first, nobody has ever said that to me before. At first, I thought he was kidding. And then I looked at him and I said, I mean, really? You're God? And he said, yes. I haven't always known it, but I'm really God. And I mean, left me kind of speechless. But the best I could come up was, well, how's that going for you? and I have since that time, I have read in Prabhupada Leela Amrita how Prabhupada would handle that, particularly that question. And there's a very, very convincing response. It says, well, if you're God, why are you suffering? You admit you're suffering. I mean, there's all different ways to sort of take on that position, and I didn't. I just sort of let the conversation meander from there. So anyway, I just wanted to share that very unusual conversation. In Bengal, you have lots of people who think they're God, and where I grew up, and I really have lots of friends, associates that are very secular and probably atheistic. They have no taste for God, no interest. And the thought has just occurred to me during this call here, like, which of those is better or worse? And I don't know that I have an answer to that. Would it be better if everybody thought that they were God? I mean, at least there's some God consciousness there, misdirected though it might be, as opposed to there is nothing that is outside what is material and what you can perceive through the material senses. And it's kind of an ongoing question, and it just leave with this thought about this. I just got back from church, and we have what we believe in church. We believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. We believe in God the Father, who is Lord Sri Krishna. But if I were to read this purport to someone from church that talks about the four-handed form of God as Vishnu, I'm sure people would say, well, that can't possibly be true because God doesn't have four arms. That's just a bunch of rubbish. Or if I would And you were just mentioning this, Caru. If I were to mention that God actually held up Govardhan Hill for a week with his left pinky and did it effortlessly, I think the answer also would be, well, it's pretty preposterous. How could God do that? But, you know, I mean, if he were God, how could he not be able to do that, actually? But so it really does raise the question, which I think is so interesting. What is it constitutionally that will have some people be open and amenable and willing to consider things that their traditional way of looking at things would just reject for so many different reasons? And there are some people that would say, all right, well, that's really different than what I've heard, but I'm really interested in spiritual things. I want to know what it's really all about out there, and that have just kind of this open-mindedness. There were two brand newcomers that visited last night. I mean, they came on a great night, and Onkar and I spent a couple of hours talking to them afterwards. It was really great. They had lots of questions, and the young lady who just graduated from college, her name was Tina. She just loved everything during the program. She felt like everybody just seemed so free and people are so happy. I mean, she was really absorbing it. And he was much more kind of, very, very nice. And, who knows what may happen. But they said they would come back. And it just made me think, why the great receptivity of one and, a little more cautious, skeptical attitude of another? The only way you can learn spiritual truth is when God teaches you himself. And the only way you can ever have the opportunity for him to do that is if you really humble yourself, you admit to yourself you really don't know anything, and read what trustworthy people tell you is something that really, really works and really resonates, that they believe is true. And with that kind of a mindset, take a crack at it. That's that. Anyway, I'm rambling here, and I need to terminate myself. But I am curious, very interested in that initial either receptivity or lack of receptivity. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for your comments. We'll go to Kapil next, but let me share with you a couple of comments. Manasa Ganga says she remembers reading a purport in a Srila Prabhupada book. Says, Prabhupada says, if you are God, please show us your universal form. That's the challenge that we can present to the pretenders. Bhakti Capri says, I want to say that I love this discussion. I started listening at 22 minutes. And Prashant continues to support our discussion with quotes from the scriptures. And maybe you want to say something about this, Kapil, or anybody else want to jump in? Anybody can jump in at any time with a quick comment, but it's interesting because someone who says, I am God, it's true, they have to have the preliminary realization that they're not the body. Because that's the step, the step on which you then make the mistaken conclusion that you're God. But the first step is to realize that you're spirit. And then you realize that you're spirit, God is spirit. And then you without acknowledging categories of spirit, levels of spirit, you say, well, I'm spirit, God is spirit, so I'm God. So it's interesting that you made the point, which is better, the one that outright rejects everything and doesn't believe, or the one who believes incorrectly that he's God. And it's true that the incorrect assertion that you're God presupposes at least the first stage of Brahman realization. And it's interesting too, because Prabhupada says that on your own, you can figure out that I'm not this body. You don't necessarily need scriptures or a guru. By insightful reasoning, you can conclude that I am not this body, that I'm a living force within this body. Then if one gets a spiritual master, one can get the complete picture that I'm not this body, that I'm spirit, but as spirit, I'm the part and not the whole. So many people, they come to this intuitive realization that I'm spirit, and then they might be misdirected or they might misconclude that I'm God. But they do get some credit for having arrived at that point. And when Prabhupada slams the impersonalists, I believe that he's slamming that category of impersonalists who, after getting the complete information from scriptures or from a guru, continue to hold on to the monistic point of view. They elevated themselves from bodily identification to understanding their spirit, but then they refuse to go to the next level. They refuse to graduate to understanding of some spirit because of ego, because of pride, and because of arrogance. But it does presuppose a certain level of spiritual advancement, and only those who dig in their heels, who are entrenched and who reject the personalistic form of the Lord, they become offenders. But not necessarily all of those who realize that they're spirit, because it's to their credit they got to that point, and if they're fortunate, they'll get a spiritual master and they will accept the next level of education. Is that fair to say? Does anybody else have any comments or refutation of that?
That's a very valid point, Prabhu. I think in one of the verses, I forget the chapter, in maybe second chapter, and I'll look for that verse when Prabhupada explains that there are two birds that are sitting in the heart. One is the Atma and the other one is Paramatma. And the other bird is watching this first bird, that how the one is focusing on sense enjoyment and enjoying. So it explains that concept of Atma and Paramatma, that Ishwar sits in our heart as a Paramatma.
Excellent. You want to add anything else? Bhakta Caprice is weighing in here. He says, one important thing about the universal form is that he can simultaneously be awake, active, asleep, and resting. Humans can't do that. Nice point. Thanks. You have some more to add in here?
First of all, thanks to Prashant Prabhu and Bhakta Caprice to glorify and make us famous over the Facebook. Charbu, my current spiritual master asked me to ask Govindadev Prabhu the name of that person who said that I am God. He said, your life is done when you find someone who says that I'm God. But jokes aside, I think when we are talking about this concept of pseudo-gurus, the first example that came to my mind is the person that, or the example that you gave few weeks ago, that someone told you that my current spiritual master. So there are not only pseudo-gurus, but there are also pseudo-disciples. And one thing that comes from our culture is the positioning of Guru and Govind. So there is a particular doha in India where we say, Guru Govind dono khade, kaake lagu pao, balhari Guru aapne Govind diyo bataya. So there are two aspects of this saying. One is you understand the positioning and distinction between a Guru and Govind, because the Guru, he knows there is three things. One, the process of service, who is serving, and who is the object of this service. Wherever there is a misunderstanding in between these three things, the server, the process of service, or whom to be served, there is always a problem. And this verse talk a lot about it. I think when we read the translation, it says that Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. So I remember there was this lecture, and this example was given that sometimes people say that I don't love Krishna. Yes, you don't love Krishna because you don't know Krishna. It is nearly impossible for you to know Krishna and then don't love him. So this verse, I think, very clearly explains that when Vasilas who mentioned about the Janam Karam, and that verse came a lot, that from fourth chapter, Janam Karam Chabe Divyam Yoveti Tatvata. There are two aspects of that verse, and I'll read that the translation of that verse, and that will explain that why there is so much confusion. It says that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and my activities. So that's the first part. The second part says, does not upon leaving the body take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. That is a short way to go back to Godhead. And we know that that is not easy. And that's the reason people, they don't understand the most important, the second part of that verse. So that's what I want to add.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Prashant has also typed in the entirety of the passage about the two birds sitting in the tree. One is a super soul, the other individual soul. Krishna is the super soul. And so it's important to know that you're not the only spirit in your body. As a spirit, you're eternal, you're cognizant, you're full of bliss, but you have to realize you're limited, that you're only aware of the pains and pleasures in this body. You're not aware of the pains and pleasures in others' bodies. But the two birds in a tree analogy shows us that along with the individual limited soul, there's the Paramatma, the Supreme Lord, who is also accompanying each individual soul. And he is aware of everything in every body. So it's when the individual soul takes shelter of and turns to the super soul for assistance and help, that he can actually solve all the problems of life and get out of the cycle of birth, death, disease, and old age. So it's crucial for one's liberation to understand the difference between the soul and the super soul. And that's why Prabhupada stresses on it so much. It's not that he's, criticizing people, that he enjoys pointing out people's shortcomings, but the Guru is so compassionate that he wants everyone to acknowledge and recognize the accompaniment of God within the heart. And the fact that if you turn to him and begin to chant his holy names, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare, he will give you all the assistance that you need in order to get out of the cycle of birth and death. That's the role of the Guru. Not only to give knowledge, but compassion, and to more or less prompt you and prod you into spiritual activity, so that you'll eventually end up back to home, back to Godhead. Sundari Priya, you want to add anything? And then we'll go with Vijay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to all the devotees assembled here. Thank you everyone for wonderful insight. This is a topic that we see is
your head is right at the feet of Lord Chaitanya. It's an amazing vision.
Yeah. You can't do it without that. So
dust from Lord Chaitanya's feet.
Yeah, the Panchatattva's feet is our only shelter. So, and because of their mercy, we have a true transcendentalist among us, the pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, who came, and every lecture we hear about Prabhupada. So one lecture I heard, and Srila Prabhupada was saying that if you are God, can you stop going to the bathroom in a few hours? Let me see how long this class goes on. And if you don't have the urge to go evacuate, then I will know that you're God. So he just cut right out. It's like we as human beings cannot even control our bathroom senses, our eating. I have it one day of fasting of Ekadashi, today being the most auspicious day of Ekadashi. Monday morning, we are going to all look for what can I eat first? That is human tendency. Then how are we talking about even comparing ourselves with God? I think we cannot even compare ourselves to pure devotees or anything. Forget about the next level. There's so many levels, so it's like, also, Prabhupada one time said, if you're God, like everybody mentioned, can you lift the Govardhan hill? Can you dance on the banks of Kalia? Can you be, even when God appeared in the jail cell, when Kamsa had locked up Vasudev and Devaki, he first showed the form of the Lord. He came at that form, and then he transformed himself as a baby. And all those are leelas that we heard, the whole Krishna book, the leela, exactly. We can't even do one thing, so it is it's completely being an illusion, because I think we as human beings think I'm this body, I'm a proprietor, I can do this, I can go to the moon, I can live, but because we just try to live in that illusion, that's why that comment like I'm God kind of is it's a myth. The I am God is a myth, and we just don't want to agree to undo it. Also, Prabhupada said one time that if you can stay without air, can you even think of breathing? We can't even think everything, that if we think of building these big skyscrapers, how are we making the dirt? How are we making the cement? Everything that we are using is provided by Krishna and his material energy. Then only are we able to glorify ourselves and say, oh, I did this and I did that. But actually, we are the 5 elements that we are made of. We cannot even function without that, and we cannot even replenish those elements. How then can we even think of doing anything? And forget about being worshipped as the ultimate personality. And we have to humble down and say, those who have realized God, we should follow their path, like Lord Chaitanya here behind me. I'm so blessed to be in the temple today, so doing service, and I can see that what we have missed out as human beings, the serenity of the Lord comes in the form of a deity just to accept our service. And if we are unfortunate that we think that we can dress like the God and act like God, then we're losing this birth, the opportunity to be a human being. So that's my limited understanding. Prabhuji, please.
I think you pointed out that we err in 2 crucial ways. There are 2 ways that we err. One is we minimize the importance of the Supreme, and we maximize our own importance. Therefore, we bring God down and we put ourselves up, and the result ends up somewhere in the area that we think that we're God. And that's a conception that we need to grow out of. Manasa Ganga comments here. She says that many times she goes out on Sankirtan, she feels like each time she approaches someone, they're giving them a choice. Even people who are impersonal or atheists or agnostic, God is within their heart, and Krishna never stops trying to enlighten them, or trying to at least make them open or eligible to receive transcendental knowledge. So the same person that you may have approached months or years ago, things may have happened in their lives. Krishna may have arranged things, brought people across their path, caused life-changing circumstances to occur, given them a little bit of insight from within their heart. So whereas they were not open in the past, now Krishna has brought them to a point of eligibility and receptivity. So we also can't discount the fact that Krishna is constantly working within the heart of the living beings to direct them back to home, back to Godhead. So we can take heart from this. We can be encouraged in our missionary activities, when we distribute prasadam, when we chant publicly, when we go online to preach, that whereas some people may not have been receptive in the past, Krishna is working within them and through them, so it may be the second or the third or the fourth time you approach them that they've come to a level of maturity where they are receptive. So those are good points. We need to ratchet down our estimation of ourselves and ratchet up our knowledge and appreciation of the Supreme Lord. And it's interesting to note that when you ratchet down your estimation of yourself, it's not minimizing yourself, it's not lowering your own self-esteem or self-respect, but to realize that I am an atom on the on the feet of the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead is the position of highest power and highest peace for the living being. When you have the Lord blowing in your direction, and when you get yourself right in the middle of what the Lord wants to do in this world, you can do anything. Nothing is impossible for someone who's properly situated. Vijay, you want to wrap this all up for us here?
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, Prabhu, Charu Das Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, my humble obeisances to the assembled devotees, and thank you for the wonderful contributions for today's Sangha. This verse inspires me to say the following, related to the word superhuman, and also related to the following two sentences I find while reading the purport. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that his birth and deeds are transcendental, and that anyone who is so fortunate as to know the transcendental nature of his birth and deeds will at once become liberated and eligible to return to the kingdom of God. So, and this second sentence is very important, related to my contribution. So, knowledge of the transcendental nature of the birth and deeds of Lord Shri Krishna is sufficient for liberation. So, my contribution based on the word superhuman from the translation and these two sentences from the purport is as follows. People sometimes say to me, okay, your God is wonderful, extraordinary, superhuman. He was there as a child lifting the Govardhan Hill 5,000 years ago. But what I need in terms of a connection with God is the following. I want him here, right now, immediately, for me to walk with him hand in hand. Can you give me that? So my answer based on this verse and purport is as follows, and please correct me if I am wrong. So you want a superhuman God. I'll give you that through the following process. Come to the Sunday Love Feast and experience the first item, bhajan. Then stay for the next item, the class on Bhagavad Gita. Then as it is. Then you go for the next item, and you will experience as a spectator the puja, and as a participant dancing and chanting in the kirtan. And then to finalize it, you will be able to taste the feast, the remnants in terms of Krishna presenting himself as food, the sacred food. And at the very end of this complete festival, you will feel yourself completely relieved from all your anxieties. And this is a superhuman act. Only God is capable of making 10, 15, 20, 30, sometimes 100 people inside a very big temple room in front of the deities, jumping in ecstasy in less than 1 hour or something like that. So the superhuman acts which are being brought to us through this verse are still happening. And we, as missionaries, we should go to people in order to replace themselves in their normal position. Come to taste the nectar. That's what you are meant for, as a part and parcel of the supreme nectar. That's my contribution.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Practical aspect of Krishna consciousness, the supernatural effects of hearing a nice enlivening talk that addresses itself to the soul, chanting the holy names of the Lord, and honoring the Lord in the form of vegetarian prasadam. It's said in the Bhagavad Gita, Anora Niyamsham Ani Mahiyamsham. The Lord is minute He's the smallest and he's the greatest. So both are beyond our conception. We can't conceive of the smallest. We can't conceive of the greatest. They're both beyond our conception. And because of that, Prabhupada says we cannot imagine a form like that of a human being who can simultaneously control the smallest and the greatest. That's our problem, isn't it?
Yes.
We can't imagine that a human-like form can control the greatest and simultaneously control the smallest. And Prabhupada gives an example, how we can understand based on an experience that we've all had. Huge, I don't know what they call them now, but when Prabhupada's around, the biggest planes, the biggest commercial airlines were the 747s. I don't know what they are now. But Prabhupada said huge 747, huge, hold 600 passengers, can fly 5 miles in the sky, 800 miles an hour, huge engines, consumes huge amount of fuel, stewardesses, pilots, and all of it is controlled by one guy. He's 5'8" and weighs 135 pounds, and he's sitting in the pilot's seat. One guy is controlling the entire plane. So Prabhupada uses this as an example to help us understand how one omnipotent, omniscient, supreme person who is manusam tanum, who is in a human-like form, is at the same time the controller of the greatest as well as the controller of the smallest.
And Charu Prabhu, do you agree with me when I say that only God is capable of relieving humanity from the anxiety that they're experiencing when this humanity glorifies Him?
The fact is that we're parts and parcel of Krishna, and so until we come to that level of realization, there always has to be anxiety. We have many psychologists, what to speak of devotees, psychologists like Carl Gustav Jung and Abraham Maslow have said that if you do not use the human form of life to pursue God consciousness, you will be full of anxiety. If not in youth, at least what we know is the mid-age crisis, full of anxiety and stress for no known reason. What we know is the middle-age crisis is more often than not caused by regrets at having missed multiple opportunities during our earlier years to pursue God consciousness, because we failed to use the human form of life for the immense profit that it affords. There cannot but be anxiety and regrets and stress, especially as we near the end of our life and realize that we've basically wasted it.
And then people go for suicide.
That's, so often. Anybody have any wrap-up comments? We'll go to Govinda, and while he's tuning up his guitar, anybody's welcome to add anything that you feel we may have neglected. I want to appreciate all the comments also on Facebook. We have 14 comments, and we've had throughout this discussion anywhere between 4 and 10 people listening on Facebook, in addition to our congenial little group here. So thanks to all of you on Zoom and on Facebook. Thanks to every one of you who amplified this wonderful subject matter, to Ras Vilas, who started the beginning Kirtan, and to Govinda, who is going to do the concluding Kirtan here.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. I guess we should spend less money on psychiatrists and more money on Prabhupada's books. It would be a much better investment. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Govindadev. That was a very rousing kirtan. And thanks again to Vilas for starting off the kirtan. Thanks to all of you for your contributions to the discussion. We'll be back next Sunday at 11 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time. And our verse will be the 21st verse in the first chapter. I looked at the Vaishnav calendar. Other than Ekadasi, today is Ekadasi, by the way, other than another Ekadasi in 2 weeks, there are no major events coming up. So we'll just concentrate on the verse as we've been doing. Also, we have our Sunday evening service in Spanish Fork this afternoon at 5 o'clock, which will be broadcast live on Facebook as well. And don't forget the morning Bhagavatam classes, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. For the 7 to 8 Saturday evening programs in Salt Lake City have been revived. They were reopened very successfully last Saturday. Everybody's welcome if you live in the area to attend. Next Saturday, we'll try and get a repeat performance from Advaita and Navina. And if you're not living in the area, then it will be on Facebook Live, thanks to Sundari Priya Mataji. So all those and many, many more opportunities to get the association of the wonderful Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Thank you for joining one and all. And until we see each other again.
Charu Prabhu, one last question. How to observe Purushottama Mass?
I'll text you separately.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Jai Ho.
Hare Krishna.